Section 132 of 15,000 Useful Phrases by Grenville Kleiser. Read for LibriVox.org by Scott Colford of JustGiblets.com, Boston, Massachusetts. And now allow me to call attention. And now behold a mystery. And now consider. And now having discussed. And now I beg that I may be permitted. And now I go back to the statement. And now I have completed my review. And now I have said enough to explain. And now I must touch upon one point. And now, if I may take for granted, and now it would be very pleasant for me, and now observe how, and now, sir, what I had first to say, and now supposing this point to be settled, and now that I have mentioned, and now the chief points of it, and now the question is asked me, and now to close let me give you, and now to what purpose do I mention? And of course you are aware, and of this I am perfectly certain, and quite as difficult is it to create. And right here lies the cause. And, sir, a word, and so, again, as regard, and so I am reminded of a story, and so I leave these words with you, and so I may point out, and so I might recount to you, and so in the other cases I have named, and so in the present case, and so on, and so through all phases, and so upon every hand, and sometimes it will be difficult, and that gave another distorted view, and the reason is very obvious, and the same holds good, and then again, and then hastily to conclude, and then I may be reminded, and then there is another thought, and then when it is said, and there are reasons why, and there is also this view, and therefore I am truly glad, and therefore it is not unfrequently quoted, and therefore it is not without regret. And this brings me to the last thing. And this is really the sense. And this leads me to say a word, and thus consistently, and thus it is conceivable, and thus it seems to me, and thus we are led on then to further question. And to all this must be added, and to return to the topic, and to this conclusion you must come, and unquestionably, and we are brought to the same conclusion, and what do you suppose will be? And when I have shown to you, and when I recall that event, and when we pass beyond the bounds of, and where, let me ask, and why should I insist? And will you still insist? And with these thoughts come others. And yet I cannot but reflect. And yet I feel justified in believing. And yet I think we all feel. And yet let me say to you. And yet one more quotation. And yet this notion is, I conceive. And yet, though this be true, and yet we ought, if we are wise, and you may also remember this, another circumstance that adds to the difficulty, another consideration which I shall adduce, another instance of signal success, another of these presumptions, another point is made clear as crystal, another reason of a kindred nature, another reflection which occurs to me, another sign of our times, another signal advantage, another striking instance. Answers doubtless may be given. Are there not many of us? Are we content to believe? Are we forever to deprive ourselves? Are we not startled into astonishment? Are we satisfied to assume? As a general rule, I hold, as a last illustration, as a matter of fact, as a proof of this, as an illustration of this truth, as briefly as I may, as far as my limits allow, as far as this is true, as far as this objection relates, as far as we know, as for the rest, as I have now replied to, as I look around on this assembly, as I rise to respond to the sentiment, as I understand this matter, as memory scans the past, as society is now constituted, as someone has well said, as the foregoing instances have shown, as to the particular instance before us, as well might we compare, as we shall see in a few moments, assuredly it is this. At the outset of this inquiry, at the risk of digression, at the same time I candidly state, at the utmost we can say, at this juncture, at this solemn moment, away then with the notion. End of section 132. This recording is in the public domain. Recording by Scott Colford of JustGiblets.com, Boston, Massachusetts.